All right. Well, thank you everybody for coming. Appreciate that. I'm Steve Jurrens with Northeast Radio SD, and we've got the Heartland AI Ethics Forum that Zach Thompson's put together for us, so we appreciate that. And Watertown usually doesn't get asked what it thinks about a technology before it shows up, but tonight is going to be a little different. Nobody on this panel is here to sell anybody anything or pitch a product, but let's see what we can learn about AI, study it, ask questions. We've got all sorts of different kinds of business owners, educators, farmers, faith leaders, civic leaders that we brought together as a panel that represents some technical expertise and creativity and real world experience. So we can kind of start off with Zach Thompson. Do you want to start off?
Sure.
Okay.
Well, how do you learn something? You bring a panel together. So that's kind of what I did here. I have just, those are kind of based off of, like, why did I want to do this? It's been on my mind, honestly, for well over a year before I had any business interest in trying to make my own way on something. But I've seen the issue with the path that AI was on and the tech companies, and how very little of the middle of the country has their voice heard in the ethical debates. A lot of the ethicists in the AI space on the coast and elsewhere have been agnostic or atheist, and that's fine. But we also need a wider breadth of discussion on this, because this is going to affect everyone for good or bad. So that's kind of where I got into it, was I saw the human potential for the good that it can do, but also concern for why are we not asking the communities that are impacted at the first level how they think about this. We've had this with the data centers being kicked around the road and run out of town, maybe around here. But maybe we can all learn a little bit more on every issue. Some of my personal convictions are that data is your property, that we need to have more prominence of security for your personal data. And I think there's new opportunity for that. There's new benefit of personal servers being able to run these AI models, so you don't have to have the cloud all the time. And human in the lead, and no frontline workers, no blue collar workers affected, I think would be my biggest issues. We got to be in charge of the decision making. I know there's a lot of talk about agentic workflows and how to automate huge swaths of your business processes, which is very interesting discussion, but you have to have the value of human judgment is going up in this environment we have, and the value of the skills gap can be closed for many people. Where what'll stand out is the strategic thinking, the systems thinking, the judgment thinking. And we're not all probably going to agree on everything on the panel, but we come together to agree that we have to talk about this and start building a framework and a local consensus. I did have a worksheet. If you want, I can have, that's at the back. You can fill it out, get your own principles put together, little notes, and we can put those on the board back here, and I will sift those from the ones we decide from the audience, and let's see what we can come up with. We have Steve Jurrens. He's here. Oh, that messed up my photo a little bit. And then Tyler, a friend of mine, technology professional in AI trust and safety, a lot of his background. He's worked in that industry a long time, so I really respect him. He was recently at Missional AI Summit talking about the human experience in AI ontological value structures for AI, and kind of he has a depth of experience there. Dr. Matt Cole, he was I met him at an event that Katie Webb had hosted on AI in writing. So we talked amongst ourselves. We found common interest in this subject. So he comes from grants and a pioneer biotech, biology and technology background in the ag industry. Katie Webb, she writes. That's one of the things she's well known for, but I'm told not the only thing. And Matt Roby, me and him know each other pretty well from being involved in local Republican politics, but we're not going to get into that. One thing I mentioned to him, and might be reflected in one of the questions, is the state bar of South Dakota. It's appeared at the time when I was still doing the research for this that there was no specific AI ethics or opinions or ethic. They have an ethics page on the state bar that I didn't see too much there, so it'd be interesting to see what the direction is going on that. And then Prioress Barb Younger from the Monastery. Very excited to have her 40 plus years of experience in technology, though this might be a little new to her.
It's not.
First question is going to kind of revolve around human dignity. What patterns can't, what system of patterns can't reach? It's kind of, when a system processes people as data points and makes decisions about us without really understanding those systems, what gets lost and what brings a person that no pattern can reproduce. Well, we can leave it at that, and I'll go back to our panelists. So I believe you have some of the questions.
I do.
You have.
Okay, so we're going to kick this bad boy off, so buckle up, kids. All right, so Zach, maybe you can start us off and give us this kind of fork in the road, like centralized AI versus distributed, and human-led AI. Mm-hmm. What's at stake for sovereignty and local control, and then Matt could follow that up with like technical side. I think the good Dr. Matt.
So me.
Oh,
No,
Yeah, I differentiated with the doctor.
the good part.
So, you could be the bad one. Follow that up maybe with the technical side, like what AI is and isn't, and what an LLM is in one sentence, why hallucination happens, all sorts of stuff. So maybe
we could go over the main definitions that might come up.
Yeah.
I do have some of those. The main ones, LLM, a large language model. That's going to be your interface for using the tool of AI pretty much. A lot of them operate as a chat function and a workflow function and a automation function. other terms that you'd see, I mean, we've had AI from Tyler's presentation I watched. He actually traced the roots all the way back to the 40s or the 50s, which is kind of deeper understanding than I had previously. But this goes back a long time. I grew up in the digital age for the most part, and I see the AI started with simple search, agentic, or just to help you search things on the internet. But it's developed, that's AI, artificial intelligence, and you have that with calculators and machinery, CNC machines, all that. We have now a discussion on AGI, which would be artificial general intelligence, an AI that is equivalent to the capabilities of human. And then there's artificial superintelligence. This is where I might lose faith in some of the Sam Altmans of the world. They really think that they want to set up a god of their own making, and that's part of my bigger concern. And some of the smaller things you use in that, you can use APIs. Those are the tokens that authenticate one system to another. That they use those on basic web platforms as well. It's the key that unlocks the door between different applications. So that's kind of the main big terms. I might have had more on the presentation we can go through later. But about the first question, something that's concerned me the most is that we've seen AI develop into, in China's instance, the centralized model. You have the social credit scoring, you have the government using facial recognition to really make 1984 into reality. You have the pre-crime and the crime preemptive punishment by the officials in communist China, and that is, and a lot of people even in the West have held China up as China's got to be the model, and I really hesitate to. At one point I thought they were going to be a free economy. People were getting raised out of poverty there, and it turns out that may have always been a sham, and they really have always held true to their principles in the Chinese Communist Party. So, but what we can have an opportunity for here in a free society is distributing that model. So I'm hopeful to see that farmers and business owners, and we might need to do this because the power issues. You might have to have your own power generation to run your GPU. Your GPUs would be a graphics processing unit, and that's a one step up from the central processing unit, the CPUs of traditional computers. We started. I had a PS3 at one point, and the Army put like 1,200 of those to make a supercomputer because it had the GPU in it. So, but I see people holding on to their data with this technology, and maybe we can chip away at the subscription models, the paywalling a little bit, so more people are more in control of the software they use. Software built specifically to your business or to your farm operation, where you don't need to rely on someone else harvesting and selling your data. That's kind of where I was going with that.
So you mean, essentially you mean how the data, like a center, if you will, how it's processed and where it's processed. Mm-hmm. So you actually mean processed here or in the U.S. or in China. Yeah. Mm-hmm. So those are the kind of differences. And what's like human-led AI then?
Human-led, that human in the loop. That's a common, and Tyler could talk about that as well. But that's probably where I'm at most comfortably right now with AI is like how I can, you're using the tools of AI and LLMs, but you are very much still in control of the process. You can already step beyond that. The technology is already there, but you're approving its actions. Or even if you do have it automated, you're getting notifications, text messages or emails. You've set up an automation, and it'll verify with you before it does anything. So the problems are mitigated.
So if it's not human led, then essentially AI is making those decisions for you without
Yeah, well, this was the kind of the following out of Anthropic and the U.S. military recently, which was kind of surprising. Anthropic has this constitutional AI model from Amode, and that's a really intriguing concept. But and they were concerned that the military was going to use this totally autonomously, for one example, and that drones, when weapon systems would be using with deciding who and what to kill without human input. And we've seen this in past sci-fi movies in the past as well. So it's a really big thing. It's going to have to be sorted out.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so let's talk to Dr. Cole if he can hear us, and kind of maybe with some technical info, like what AI is and isn't, and maybe talk to us a little bit about the LLM and why, like, let's talk about hallucinations and why local processing running AI in your own hardware is suddenly viable in 2026.
Okay, so can you guys hear me over there?
Yes.
Yeah.
On your guys' side? Okay. And then can we move the microphone closer to the speakers too? Tyler and I have been
I will try.
having a tough time hearing that.
Yeah, we can hear anything.
Yeah, that's
You
as long
can
as
hear parts.
Are these
That's
just
as long as the
are these
cord
just for
is.
you?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I don't. I guess I needed a cord. Is that better?
Yeah, that's a bit better.
Hopefully that works for everyone.
And then could we get, if it's possible, could you guys turn the camera on and face it towards the panel and the audience so we can see who we're talking to? Because it's a black screen for us right now.
Oh, it is. Okay. Video. We will use.
Okay, so I've also got my notes open to me right here next to me that you sent me, Zach, just so everyone knows. And so I'll give a little bit, I'll start talking a little bit. We can see that now. A background about myself, because that's a good time. Oh, cool, now it's zooming in on Zach.
No. Look at this.
So back in, what was it? 2014, when I was starting college, big data, I think is a good starting point of, that's where a lot of this started coming to be of what we're calling AI today. So mathematics department, they got a new building and they were actually just starting with they were calling basically a big data masters. And so that was something where you could, it was a bunch of specialized classes in that area.
Mm-hmm.
Because people were just starting to realize now we're getting all of this data and learning that in the agricultural space, for example, you get all these different layers of data, and it comes down to, what do we start being able to do with that? Some people figured out you could do some modeling and statistics and, be able to solve a bunch of interesting problems that way. And so, it had been about 10 years ago, large language models were a thing where people were saying, okay, we could feed this stuff into a machine, it learns, and it's able to tell us, like, when's the best time to put down fertilizer? When would the best time to plant be? When would the best time to harvest be? Stuff like that. And so basically, I got come up alongside that during my PhD and all of, because precision ag was also a thing where we started collecting data from all these fields at the same time. So over the last 10 years, it's kind of been interesting to see how this evolves now with AI coming into the picture, because we've basically learned, okay, there's a lot of data to collect. We have the technology to basically put sensors and whatever monitors out there to collect this data. And now it's kind of coming down to how do we handle this and what do we do with this data? What problems can we solve, stuff like that. So AI now, it's not just a large, AI is basically, yes, a large language model, but, I kind of also see it as a little bit more technically advanced than that because it is, it does things a little bit differently, and I'm still learning as much as I can in this space myself. I mean, it is rapidly changing and growing. You learn something new every day. Yeah, so Zach, could I get a repeat of the question again?
So
I kind of went off on a tangent from where large language models started there to where we're at today with AI. And so it's basically, a tool that we're using and figuring out how do we use data in different ways.
So we were kind of also wondering, there's a talk about like local processing and running AI on your own hardware, and I think how is it so easily accessible and viable nowadays?
Okay, and that's another interesting point to talk about too, because right now we are seeing a lot of people that want to put up all these data centers, but at the same time, GPUs, for example, we're seeing them get very expensive. And the reason for that is also, putting AI chips in our own phones, for example.
Yeah.
And so with these data centers, kind of one interesting thing you got to think about is, okay, there's demand for AI right now because everybody's using it, but nobody's phones has an AI chip in it. And so, the next generation of phones and computers and everything, they're all going to have AI chips in them, which when that starts coming about, then your phone, when you're using ChatGPT, doesn't have to send your AI prompt off to a data center somewhere. It'll be able to handle things locally. And I think, Tyler, you probably have, if my technical expertise on this is wrong, feel free to correct me. So as we kind of go forward on this data center thing, we got to think about, okay, what's the point this is feasible without it being a long-term liability? Because yes, there's a high demand for AI right now, but with time, as the market equilibrates, people are going to have AI on their own phones, and we're still going to have these huge data centers. Are they essentially going to sit empty and do nothing, let's say 10, 20 years from now? I think that's a fair question to pose. But I do think there are applications, let's say that, again, coming from back in the day of big data, there are sufficiently large jobs that may require a data center. And so, that can be where, okay, is this worth a long-term investment of drug discovery, for example? That requires an insane amount of data with what they're trying to do with AI there too. So, if we have a large data center, is there going to be a large project like drug discovery, for example, that will be there in the long term for that data center to handle? And it's not just an app that you're trying to power on a phone. That'll probably disappear in 5 to 10 years anyways when everyone has an AI chip on their phone.
Very good, thank you.
Did I kind of round that off nicely, or did I lose anybody?
No, I think that was a good explanation. Could you talk a little bit about this kind of like why hallucination happens? Is that something that you deal with as well?
So, yes, I deal with it, but I also kind of have ways to mitigate it, as another way to say it, as well. So AI is, as of right now, in my mind, is kind of like a kid. It knows to do, like, it's a kid that's grown up enough to do things, but it also doesn't know what to do and what not to do. And so, these companies are kind of the same way, because AI is a product, and so it's a new product, and these companies are still learning exactly how to treat, what this product is going to be. This is something that's meant to generate an answer for you or give you a reply, because you are talking to this, and imagine you're a company and you basically make an AI that's supposed to provide answers to you. You're not going to have a good product if it's not going to talk back to you. And so, this AI is meant to generate a response to your question. And so sometimes it kind of hallucinates a bit, because it's like, oh, logically, this makes sense of a reply. But if you go back and check the sources that this machine is citing, they're just non-existent or not there. And I've ran into that issue a couple times before, but one area I'm kind of able to resolve that is, again, this is a kid, it doesn't always know better because it's giving you a response that is going to make you happy, is, you got to double check its work. And so if I'm doing something that is fairly technical, I'm going to tell the AI explicitly, okay, come up with an annotated bibliography, show me your equations and your calculations, all this stuff. And it normally does a good job of generating all that at the end of a response for me. And then I'll take that information and be like a teacher almost and go through, okay, what I learned in school, is the basic arithmetic correct? But coming back around to hallucinating, it's more in the sources. What information and data is this AI pulling from the internet, basically, and is thinking, okay, this is correct information. Because that's a whole other issue that can get talked about too, is AI does not have the ability to really discern what is truthful and not truthful on the internet.
Yeah.
Again, like a kid, it's on the internet, it's going to believe everything it's reading on the internet. You and I might be able to tell when something's BS on the internet, but AI really can't. So that's where checking the sources of what this AI is reading is, again, very important. And in some cases, it's given me incorrect URLs, but if I go and look up article and the author of whatever is being cited, that'll normally point me to directly what that AI is reading. So even the URL, that's another spot it seems to hallucinate, is the URL directly where I can access these articles. But almost every time it gets the article title and the author is correct. And so if I can't find that article from, with a certain title and the authors, I normally throw that out, because that AI is definitely making stuff up at that point. Because then that article's non-existent and it just thinks it's there. But if you can find the article name with the authors, normally you're good to go there. You can quickly check what AI is reading is there. Because it comes up with really good logic at times, but it fluffs it. Yeah, it makes it up as it goes.
Very good, thank you.
Steve, can I add something real quick?
Yeah.
So I listened a month or so ago. I listened to a podcast that, an investment-related podcast, but it was kind of like back to the basics, like what exactly is happening in AI, what exactly is it doing, and these guys are more technically sophisticated than I am. But this is what I understood from what I heard, was that essentially it's predicting what the next token, the next word, the next letter is going to be based on probabilities. And so it's done all these, it's trained based on the sources that it's been trained on, which essentially is perhaps the World Wide Web entirely, or there's certain exclusions. And then based on all of that's learned, you ask it a question, a prompt, and it's predicting based on what it knows, what the next token, what the next item will be in its response based on a probability. It might be 90-10, 60-40, or whatever. And so because of that, inherently, at some point, it's going to choose wrong. It's going to go astray because it's using probabilities. It's not thinking per se. It looks very much like it's thinking, but it acts as a prediction machine for what the next token is going to be. And inevitably, because it's a probability weighted basis, inevitably it's going to get it wrong sometimes. And the podcast I was listening to, they were kind of like, it's almost amazing that it doesn't hallucinate more. And what the challenge is with AI, I've talked to some lawyers about how they're adopting AI in their practices, that it's smooth, right? And so it's like a smooth liar, right? And so it makes something up because to your point here, its job is to produce an answer, and so it's going to, whether it's right or wrong, it's going to make it sound right, and so that when judgment has to come in and go correct. So you still have to, you're using it in a professional setting, you're asking it about to be able to know what it's wrong, and you don't know what you don't know type of situation. So
very good. Okay. Well, I was just gonna maybe go on with some of what he had just talked about as well. Maybe we'll talk to KT and ask you as a author, you create characters from scratch, or imagine. You think about what makes that person tick, their voice, their choices, maybe their inner voice. When you first encountered AI that could generate images and hold these conversations, what did that do to you, and what did it make you feel about human creativity?
Well, I mean, that's multiple questions in here, but honestly, when I first encountered AI as an author, I encountered it because a lot of authors were talking about how, there's people who are using AI to write their entire books. There are people who are using AI to create their book covers, to do things like that. And what it does is it takes away from human creativity, because it can only pull from the things that it knows from the internet, right? So it can't create something like, I have characters that I've made up a complete animal that's a combination of multiple different animals, and it doesn't know how to imagine. It doesn't know how to do that. It can seem like it's an imagination, but really it's regurgitating a lot of other information that it's kind of compiled into one. So of course you've heard a lot of, fact checking, those types of things. That's not something that I have to worry much about, because I'm not doing anything factual. I typically use AI when I, other than when I, do things like, why does my plant look like this? Typically it's for fun, or for me when I'm trying to do a writing exercise or something. But I do think that the conversations that I've had with AI about my books and about characters and things like that, I've found that it is often clinical, I guess is a good way to put it. The emotion is not there. So if I say, hey, I'm having a hard time figuring out what this scene should be like. Can you write an example? And it'll write the example, and it doesn't make me feel the way that something written by a human would make me feel. And so I've discovered that is something you can tell if you're reading something that was just written by AI. It doesn't feel human. It doesn't, the words don't, I talk like a human being, right? So, and sometimes a little bit of a weird one, but AI doesn't have a personality like that. It doesn't really have that quirkiness or that personal touch that a human gives it. I don't know if that really answered the question so much.
Most definitely.
Okay.
Do you feel that in the industry, you can speak for the entire
Oh yeah,
author
totally,
and book
100%
industry.
an expert.
But is there like a thing where we don't want to see as much AI, or is there a whole demographic of people that don't care and they'll consume that and they'll use it or make it?
Yes, to both. It is a hot topic right now. There are some events, so I go to different book signings that have multiple authors at them. There are some events that if they think that your stuff has that element to it, if somebody gives me a book and says, here, look at these two book covers, which one was made by AI? I can tell you which one was made by AI because it uses the same font. It's just slightly changed. The graphics are very similar. So there's places that won't let you in if you've used AI to create your book covers, or Amazon requires you now to check a little box that says my book was not created using AI. And it's really got to do with the writing piece of it. So I didn't sit down and say, write me a 50,000 word novel about such and such, because you can. There are programs that do that. You have to pay for them, but you're paying a computer to write your book for you, and you can say it has to be this many words, has to be this many pages, has to have this person, this person, this person, and here you go, and then it will write it for you. So yes, there are people who are very, very staunchly in the absolutely no, do not use AI in any way. Then there's people like me who are like, well, there might be some ways that it can be useful. I'm not a very organized person, so I like to use it to help organize some of the thoughts and ideas that I've come up with for different projects. But then there's people who are like, well, whatever, I just want to read, so they'll read anything.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Is there, so that you know of, is there, if you authored a book and like it was all AI, I mean, you can put your name on it and that doesn't really matter then?
From what I understand, yeah. I mean, you can do that. So we talk about the ethics. Ethically, that's a terrible idea. But yeah, I mean, there are authors out there that I believe there are some authors out there that do that, or utilize AI very heavily when it comes to writing their stories. Yes. And I don't think that it's right to do that, simply because the written word in that fashion is meant to be emotional. It's meant to be messy. It's meant to make you feel something. I'm a fiction writer, so I don't do a lot of the nonfiction, but I imagine that anyone who's wanting to sit down and read a story, you want a story that's going to make you feel connected somehow, or it might make you cry, it might make you laugh. And AI just doesn't, it might make me laugh, I think, yeah, because it can tell some jokes, but I don't know that it really feels, I know it doesn't feel, and so I don't think it's programmed really well to feel things.
Mm-hmm. Good. Does anyone else want to comment on anything like that?
Well, I think part of what you're touching on is our humanity. It's our humanness. It is what separates us from the machines and technology that we create. And, in the most basic sense, technology is a tool. It is a tool like a hammer or a marker. And so those items, a hammer or a marker, could be used to do harm to people, right? So we get into part of the point of our conversation is, what do we do with a technology that we've created? Everybody probably walked in here with a cell phone, right? I've got my iPad sitting in front of me. So I think part of the challenge for us as users and producers, because we produce things, I produce emails on my technology, is where are the guardrails and who's responsible for the guardrails that protect the people that created a product. So you're using a tool to create a product, let's say, biodegradable water bottle. So that should be protected in some manner. But what protects our humanity? And so ethics are touchy because sometimes they're based on moral concepts and we don't all have the same morality. And so I think this is part of what is tough. However, if we don't put our voice into it, basically, it will tell us what we're going to do. And I think it also speaks, though, to our world is very chaotic right now. This has ramped up in a really, maybe an unforeseen speed. And so we are dealing with things like, where do we put all the data centers? Are they going to be used for 20 years? Or are they going to be used for 5 because the technology is going to make it obsolete? So there's so many questions that are unanswered. It's moving at a very high rate of speed. We're reacting instead of responding. So a forum like this is really important. Data centers are needed in some regard. Are they needed on every street corner? I would submit to not. And so I think that our part of it is to voice our concern and opinions, but also to help create the guardrails. And we do that locally. We start locally, which is why this is important. All politics is local. It really is. And so we get to decide how this rolls out to some extent, or we should, as much as we can. And it's not just to protect our humanity, it's to protect all that we've created together on this earth. It's not just about one thing. It's very complex. So you got to do a bunch of things in parallel. So.
Yeah, very good. Matt, Roby, you deal with finances, right?
Yeah.
In your day job, if you will. So what would be your thoughts on, you have a very sophisticated calculator that, are programmed to do, I know, like help with budgets and finances, and I'll just help with mathematics. Let's be simple. But like you have AI now that you could maybe attach someone's finances or P&L or whatever and help forecast things, or maybe in other fields they can help with investments and things like that. There's apps for those. What do you think of the AI and entering the financial realm?
Well, on the privacy piece, I actually this thought just crossed my mind not that long ago, and I chose not to do it. We just got done with tax season, and I thought, I should just input my tax return into XYZ chat, XYZ AI, and see if it can tell me over the next year what I can do to reduce my tax burden next year. And I thought, that's probably not the best idea. just stick my tax return into Chat GPT or something like that. So I declined to do that. And
there's a new model that I saw come across my news feed. They're testing a screener, a security screener, so you could put in PII, personal identifying information, and it would automatically scrub that instead of manually going through your PDFs and redacting that yourself. I think I looked at to do that with my taxes as well, but I just was like, no, I got 4 different accounts. I don't want all those numbers. So I was just reading the numbers that I needed and not the sensitive information.
Sure.
So but new technology is coming that we might be able to do that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think, in terms of in the finance realm, before the AI has become such a hot topic, there's software itself has already, for the last 20 or 30 years, has already, I think of like mint.com. It's gone out of business now, but, used to you link in, and there's subsequent companies, Monarch and a few others. I know that you can link all your bank accounts, you can link all your investment accounts, you can link everything, it'll aggregate it all together, and it'll give you suggestions and stuff like that. So that was even pre-AI that people were already kind of aggregating those things together. And so I think AI just kind of supercharges that to some extent. And, in terms of finances as a whole, you're thinking of like buying or selling public stock, for example. There's analysts all over the world that are buying and selling stock all day long, and AI is just going to supercharge the activity that they used to be doing manually. Creating spreadsheets that might take 10 or 12 hours to create is now going to take them 10 minutes to create. But at the end of the day, they're also competing against other humans. They're trying to do the same thing, and machines, that are also automatically trading stock, for example. And so, I think it's going to have a pretty profound effect in terms of the software industry. If you follow the stock market much over the last several months, it's kind of dawned on people that perhaps the software industry is in jeopardy because of, and I've never used Anthropic or any of the coding tools, but I know folks that have that, they've created a new little CRM system for their small business, and it created it, and it says, which folder do you want to put this in? And it puts it right on you own it now. It puts it right on your computer. It's not in the cloud anywhere. And so if you think about that capability to create your little bespoke software system for your small business rather than pay XYZ public software company, I think there's there is probably some headwinds for the software industry. Now, I think that there's going to be, on the privacy front, I think there's going to be I think of creativity. We talked about book writing. I mean, part of the tension is that, if you use an AI to write a book, there's a chance that it scrubbed from a copyrighted piece of material.
That's right.
And so the people that are publishing books or putting out artwork or whatever that's created by AI are also taking legal risk that they could be infringing on copyright law, which still applies, right, in the case of AI. And so I think there's going to be, these software companies. I think of like Adobe, for example. There's companies that to make sure that. So if you're creating something in Adobe, there's going to be a market created for them to say, this is we guarantee you will not be sued for not sued, but anybody can sue a ham sandwich, right? But we guarantee you're not going to be infringing on somebody's copyright when you create XYZ work product in Adobe. And so there's going to be new iterations of the market's going to respond to these desires for privacy. Not to say that new laws and policies might not be needed. There's also going to the market will also respond to people's human desires for privacy in this age of AI. So.
Very good. Well, maybe we could talk to Tyler.
Are you taking questions?
Do you want to
Sure.
write it down or ask it now?
Sure.
Well, let me just follow with that, if I might.
Yeah.
So I'm thinking, you're talking about privacy, and I'm back at thinking about the federal government wanting to pull all of our data together so they know everything. And they want to make, and they've done that. They've taken things away. Some of the lines that we believed were there between the Social Security and so on. And so, I know that's partly AI, but that has to do with the human element of control and so on. I remember many years ago, it was at SDSU, they did a forum on AI and on safety. And someone asked the question, well, is my online banking safe? Which is a very practical thing. Mm-hmm. And the young man who was studying at DSU said, well, I could keep mine safe, but I don't think you would ever be able to do that because I don't have the skills to do that. And so I guess this is the very important issue for me, the ethics, the humanity of it, but also my ability to be autonomous and not be controlled by the government or whomever,
or anyone,
having my information. And so I'd like to kind of understand that, because you're talking about somebody coming up with a program and I could put that in, and I'm thinking, do I trust that? Mm-hmm. I'm very, very suspicious about, because they're in an age of things that I thought were true and they're absolutely changing. There's no ethic.
Yeah.
Very little. So I opened that as a comment, and I welcome anybody's thought about that. Affirmation, am I crazy?
If you're crazy, you have good company. I think that's why we're all here, honestly. And I certainly don't have the answers, but you posit really the heart of it all. We all use technology in different ways, but one of the things that makes us incredibly unique, our humanness, is how diverse we all are. We share 99.8% of the same DNA. That means we're pretty darn alike, but we're not. Because that is what, I guess you could say, is what enlivens the human person, the soul, the spirit, the divine, whatever you might believe, however you frame it, is how do we guard and protect that? Because what could happen without the proper guardrails or ethics, it's already happening. If you're on social media, you're going to get fed through the algorithm the things you like, or sometimes the things you disagree about will end up there. So that's being written out there. And we've lived life in a different way. If I think about the young people, they aren't going to know any different. we have the gift of years and experience, so we have some cognizant, wait a minute, I don't like that. Wait a minute, I think that's AI. Wait a minute, I'm trying to protect my tax information. People younger than us who are used to that and believe that it is true and it is safe, there's not, I don't see anything to protect them.
That is my concern. My grandchildren think that this
Can
is always
I,
true.
can I add
I know.
something?
Yes,
Let's hear from Tyler.
Yeah.
you're right, Marilyn.
So my background, I spent the last 7 years at Google, and I just spent the last 4 months of my career there in trust and safety. And what I want to show you is kind of how to answer the person's question earlier. I don't know if you guys can see my screen or if I'm on a projector anywhere.
Sharing.
Can you see this?
Yep. We're good.
Okay, so this is how I kind of think about data in terms of risk. Okay, so you have public data, like your weather data, your health trends. This is like macroeconomic data, CDC trends when I say health, your financial data on Wall Street. Then you have your institutional data, academic research, public reports from manufacturing companies, SEC filings, right? Agricultural data where crops are moving. Warren Buffett games the stock market because he can read reports of the rail shipments between states, and he makes forecasts based on that public data. So, and then where we get into is kind of, this is the sticky part, right? Mm-hmm. Platform data. This is where people get nervous about what they're posting online and what data is visible and what can be used and what can be measured. And what I'll share is that anything can be measured. But ethically speaking, not all things should be measured. And it really boils down to what executives have a risk tolerance for what kind of decisions or measurement they want to do. So, for example, if you're in a telco company like Verizon or AT&T, because they're highly regulated, the risk tolerance to exploit data is very low. Or if you're like an IoT company, or you're maybe an e-commerce company, the amount of risk you're willing to take is much higher. You might package certain data sets and anonymize them and then productize them and sell them on markets, data markets. And the type of data you'll find in those data sets is not generally personally identifiable information, because that's very scary, that's very risky. You're asking you to get sued. Very few companies are willing to ship or sell or exchange personally identifiable information. What they're more likely willing to do is say, 25,000 people bought shoes at 4 p.m. on Thursday in this city in these brands, but they won't necessarily say who bought them, because that would be very nefarious. So, and then the last thing is consumer data and personal data. And the two biggest risks are these two buckets. And the reason I say that is this is where most adversarial activity takes place. So when you think of like state actors hacking institutions or taking advantage of large cybersecurity flaws in networks or systems, it generally happens most often in this world. It's much harder to hack an institutional platform or data platform. So what you'll see here is an example of adversarial activity is maybe, you have a company like Yelp and you have a small business on Yelp. You're a flower shop, and some guy in China decides to hold your flower shop hostage by posting a lot of bad reviews on Yelp. And the only thing you can do as that flower shop owner is file a ticket with Yelp and pray that they will make adjustment to the reviews because they're fraudulent. And platforms, so we're now talking kind of in the middle ground. And most platforms have good mechanisms to revert bad action, but many don't. And the bureaucracy of getting something adjusted or fixed can be very challenging. And so that's a problem. And the reason I bring this up is this is pre-AI. We're talking pre-AI. Mm-hmm. Now, when you add AI, these two places, the threat surface explodes. You have people that can stand up AI agents on their desktop, or you have state actors using DeepSeek that can launch massive attacks on a system, an institution, or a vertical and cause an immense amount of confusion. And we see this already in like what happens with the different wars that are going on in the world. you see on your feed content that's partially true or not true, or you see content that's exaggerated. And what that does is it causes anxiety, it causes distraction. It actually reduces the margins on many platforms, the social media platforms, because those posts are trending, but they're not actually creating attraction to the platform, and they're not really creating value. They're not creating ad revenue. So they eat up views. And platforms are not perfect at identifying false content that makes bad margins versus good content that increases margins. And so when you add AI and the scale at which AI can operate, I'll give you this metric. Last year, Cloudflare, which is a DNS company, well, they do a lot of things. They do CDNs and a lot of other stuff. Anyways, their CTO said they prevented 500 billion false login attempts last year. And that's, not a big number, actually. When you look at the total surface area of the internet and everything that is happening, it's in the trillions. Like, there's trillions of clicks, false posts, false things, fraudulent things happening on the internet, and AI is going to just make that worse. So, in my view, this is my personal opinion. So what has to happen is we have to think about how to manage it. And there's three approaches. There's creating a really centralized system, which I'm not in favor of, and that's not what we have today. Think of like what China has. The second option is to create a kind of hybrid, concentrated, distributed system, which is what we more or less have today, where you have these large tech companies that hold proprietary ownership over these AI models and can gatekeep them. Like when Anthropic came out with Mythos, or whatever it's called, right? They said, oh, this is too dangerous, we're not going to release it.
Right.
But what that really said wasn't, oh, don't worry, we found it, we beat the industry, we're here first. It was more like, hey, just so you all know, this stuff's real. So, and we have it, but we don't know, and this is the part they're not saying, we don't know who else has it. China could have it in 6 more months. Other countries could have it. A random institution, a lab in the middle of nowhere in Nevada, some guy who's a great computer scientist could have it on his desktop by renting out a couple nodes at some on-prem data center somewhere that no one knows about. So it just shows that it's potentially there. Like we're potentially, so that's the option. That the second option is that hybrid. We have big tech companies policing kind of in a distributed way this technology that can be both distributed but also concentrated. And then the last option is just totally distributed. And what does that look like? That looks like fundamentally re-architecting how the internet works today. And that is something that many conversations are being had to discuss in different institutions, academics, because the other two options don't really fit American politics, fit culture. We don't want a Chinese internet. We really don't want margins going down. We don't want SaaS being obliterated. So what does that mean? It means we need to rethink how the internet functions. And so what I personally see happening is you'll see new protocols emerge. There's some of these already. So you have, if you're familiar with how the internet formed back in the 80s, there was ARPANET, TCP/IP. That's fundamentally the addressing space, like you have a post box. It's how everything connects and communicates on every level of hardware, more or less. And that laid the foundation for the internet. And then there's many other protocols that were built on top of that, like HTTP and other things. And now there's agentic work protocols, like for shared standards, shared operability, like MCP. That's Anthropic's protocol. And it's not a network protocol. It's more just of a security handshake between two agents. And that's the workaround, that's the glue and duct tape on the internet today. I hypothesize that TCP will actually change. The addressing space of the internet will fundamentally change. The visual reality of how we engage with content and information will change in the next 3 to 5 years. Maybe sooner, maybe later. A lot of people postulated that like voice on your phone and your watch would more or less come to be very quickly. Actually, it's a very hard thing to do, so there's still more work that needs to be done there. But from a device-to-device standpoint, agent-to-agent standpoint, user-to-agent, user-to-user standpoint, all of that peering activity that's not hard to rework when you talk about networking infrastructure. So people are thinking about that as a workaround, fundamentally breaking apart the internet and rethinking how it works from a lowest layer up. And I don't think that's going to happen soon, but expect it over the next decade. And then the other thing I'll share is what these large tech companies currently do to kind of keep the lid on all the bad actors. So what most companies like Facebook and my previous employer did is use AI agents to review content. So we had models that trained on what bad content looked like, and it would algorithmically look at content and then manage that content. And don't think of this as like moderation. It's not like this person cussed, we don't like that, we're taking it down. It's more like this website looks like the homepage of Facebook, but the URL is not owned by Facebook. This is a copy. This is a fake page. So we'll take stuff like that down. Or this company is claiming to sell a regulated substance, like, think of a drug that is regulated that's like a medical drug. I don't know, insulin. This company is not licensed to sell insulin in the United States, but they're selling insulin and it's being shipped over from India. Take it down. So that side of stuff is being managed. I don't worry about that stuff. That stuff's all more or less worked out. What I worry about is these super agents like Mythos being leaked or being leveraged by institutions, by rogue actors, by state actors, and that causing a lot of havoc in addition to what havoc is already existing with like deep fakes and content proliferation that's not true or not validated. So that's what I worry about with AI agents. And then I think the question that was asked earlier was, how do we maintain our identity? If that's what I understood the question to be, is like, was that right? I don't know if I understood this. It's a woman that asked the question. I don't know. Maybe you can repeat the question. I could address that too.
Was it your security or your identity or your privacy?
It was both.
It was all that.
Kind of all of it wrapped in one.
Yeah.
Wait, can you say that again? I can't hear.
Kind of all of it wrapped in one.
Security, identity, privacy, being
privacy, right? So privacy, data privacy,
humanity, individuality.
So data privacy is probably the hardest thing to manage in this bucket, personal data, because everybody that works or uses a technology relies on the provider of that technology to safeguard the data that it creates, the data that you generate on the platform, right? Pick anything. People in this room, I'm assuming, don't have a desktop server underneath their desk where they're generating their own random raw data on some random piece of software that they are building. Most people don't have that. That will, though, be a common thing that might happen as AI proliferates, and that poses a big problem. We get back to the fundamentals of how to manage personal data, like at the internet back in the 90s, right? How do I keep someone from hacking my desktop? How do I keep someone from taking the data that I fed a model that's locally hosted and using that as some sort of a hostage negotiation? How do we do these things? Those are the things no one's talking about. No one even sees that far. Everyone's still focused on state actors, content proliferation, and how we manage privacy and data privacy at the platform level. No one's thinking about what it's going to work, what the world's going to look like in a distributed nature. And so I'm always thinking about that because that's generally the trend things go towards. They start out hyper-centralized, then they get mildly distributed or managed or gate-kept, and then they become totally distributed and open. That's what the Western world has used as a delivery model for the last 100 years, in everything. Medicine, education, technology is the last trend. So everything eventually becomes distributed just due to the principles of scaling something. And nobody's thinking about how to safeguard data or privacy in a distributed way. And so I say that not to freak anyone out. I say that I kind of as an optimist, if anyone wants to invest in places, or as an investor, I would think about looking at those sort of opportunities. What people are thinking 3-4 years from now when everything that we're talking about today doesn't matter and everything is distributed. That's the place to invest today, I think. But anyway.
Can you talk a little bit more about I'm just having a hard time envisioning what you mean by distributed and the reworking of the internet.
I can't hear. Can you guys speak in the mic? Or can you restate the question, Zach?
Your
Where's the mic?
your reworking of the internet. He's confused about it.
Just like, what do you mean by, in terms of distributed, do you mean we all have little servers in our home? Or what do you mean by the remaking of the internet to a distributed?
It could be that. I don't know, but it could be that. So there's theories running around as, so think yes. So yes and no. Distributed in the sense that you don't have a central owner. So telco, for example, right now is the central owner of all fiber. That doesn't work anymore. Starlink is the next phase of the underlying infrastructure for a distributed global network. Telcos are gatekeepers, and they don't do a good job of gatekeeping. It's a failed model. Too much activity they can't police. Too many potholes they can't patch. Too much cost to lay the fiber. Too much cost to maintain the fiber. And as systems scale, as we go to 6G, 7G, as more bandwidth and more wavelengths are open, it doesn't make sense to maintain fiber. So this is my projection. In 10 years, we won't really see telco as relevant as it is today. In the same way that cable television is irrelevant and increasingly becoming relevant, right? Because now we have streaming services. And the streaming services created the monetization vehicle for the actual infrastructure to fade out. So there will be monetization systems in Starlink and others that start using global satellite networking that telcos. Once these out of telcos happen, the question becomes, okay, well then how is this going to be managed? And it's not going to be on Starlink to manage it. They're just going to host infrastructure just like the telcos. Yep. So the question becomes, well then, where are the models going to live? Are they going to be kept at these large tech companies, or are they going to be distributed? I think it'll be a bit of both, but more people will lean to distributed model function for small tasks, to your point, because software generation can be done at home. You don't need to spend thousands of dollars in licensing anymore. You can just build something yourself. And the other reason I think this is we spend hours behind screens. My generation hates that. We hate it. I hate it. Most everybody that grew up playing video games, that were brainwashed to enjoy screen time, now we're in our 30s and 40s and we hate it. We hate it. And so we're not a big fan of sitting and typing and mousing. We're physically active. We like to be outdoors. There's no reason that we should be confined to a screen if AI can be a medium to do work wherever we are with whatever profession we are in and whatever tasks need to be completed. So I foresee that UI, UX, and this like buttons, side panels, top drop downs, all that crap is going to go away. Eventually, once the technology catches up, once vocal recognition catches up, and visual cueing catches up, and it's shrunk to be more portable. So yeah, if you pay close attention, everything's kind of being set up for a slow transition away from how things work today in the internet, with the underlying IP addressing space being talked about in academic settings, new IP addresses and protocols being discussed as potential workarounds for TCP/IP. You look at telcos being faded away, Starlink come to fashion. You look at user behaviors, like people just don't like screens and buttons and drop downs. They hate clicking shit. All of that combined, it all points to me saying this is all going to shift, and it should surprise nobody when it does. Just like we were never surprised. My generation was not surprised at all when social media came around. We played video games and we used email, and it sucked. And then Facebook came around. We're like, this is great. Now we can share a lot more. And as we get older, as Gen Z gets older, as they are born into what technology they have today, which is a lot of wearable device technology, and they grow up and they become 20, 30-year-old adults, they're not going to want to use wearable device technology anymore. They're going to have embedded technology. It'll probably sit under their skin. That terrifies me. That's not something I want. But that's something that they're increasingly comfortable with. So that's the direction we're going, and I don't really like it. And I don't say all this to be super negative or like doomy. I say it because it's happening. It all points that it's happening, but that doesn't mean it's determined to be a negative outcome. It doesn't mean like we're going to relive the Book of Revelations or something. That's not deterministic. It just means things are going to change. That's all. Does this make sense?
Yes.
Thank you.
So just to kind of touch a little bit on that, the negative, like the concern part, I think something, and this is my personal thoughts and my personal opinions on this. I think a lot of the fear that we have about oh, computers are going to take over the world and we're all going to die. And it's all based in fiction. It's all based on stories that we created. And now we've held so closely to that now we're afraid that that's what's going to happen. And so then when we hear about these advances in technology, we're like, no, oh no, it's going to take over. But we forget that we are the ones who have the power button. We're the ones that create the things that are going to be doing smarter things for us, better things for us. And I know you had mentioned the, young people. I have teenagers, so I know what you're saying there with them being increasingly more comfortable. And I don't remember who mentioned it. There was a comment made about, I think you were talking about kids and not knowing. Mm-hmm. We're the ones who teach them that. We can't just say, you've got access to the internet, figure it out. Right. Because we are the ones who, and I'm a millennial. We're the ones who are going to be teaching our children, this is what you have to do. My kids have come to me and said, Mom, such and such, this is happening. And I'm like, okay, but where did you get that information? Well, I saw it on Facebook. Okay, cool. But where did it come from?
True, right?
Where did it come from? And so just like when, back in the day when, and I'm sure it's totally different for everybody, but my age group, we were in that transitional period where we used the library catalogs, but then we also were starting to use Encarta, which was just the coolest thing ever. We had our encyclopedias available to us, right? And so those types of things, we were taught, cite your source. Make sure that your source is a credible source. And we were taught how to do those things. Kids now, teachers they're trying to teach them how to do the things, but not all of the kids are listening. But we can't just leave it to the teachers and to the educational system. Parents have to guide their children, just as they always have. It is our job to guide our children so that they know where the safety is and where the this is just complete and utter crap, and this is the stuff that you actually should be looking at. And it's harder now than it ever has been, because it is hard to tell, it's fake news or what's real. It's hard out there right now because there are so many good fake things available to kids, and it's hard for them. My kids, it cracks me up. Sometimes they'll show me a video, or I'll show them a video and they'll go, oh, that's AI. Well, I also dabble in, I do Photoshop and things like that. I love photography, and I can edit photos. I can do those types of things. I know what to look for in things when you see the difference between the real and where something was placed there. And so I always ask them, tell me why. What about it tells you that that's not real? Because if they can spot it and they can tell me, then I have faith that when they look at situations and they're like, whoa, is this real or is this War of the Worlds? I have faith that they're going to know the difference there. And so we can't just say, nope, we don't want to do it. We're afraid of it. We're afraid what's going to happen. So we're just going to leave it.
Yeah.
We have to be able to take that control and show upcoming generations that you can't just throw your hands up and say, nope, never mind, because that's when things are going to fall into the wrong hands. They're not going to be in the hands of the people who are actually trying to better the world with technology.
Right. I'm glad you framed it up that way, because like I said, you can do harm with this or you can do good with it, right? So, and that's part of my point when I said all politics is local. So that's the same type of thing, right? We can sit back and be apathetic and not show up and let it happen. Or we can say, what's the good and value here? Well, let's make sure that's what happens. Mm-hmm. So if we sit back in the fear of it all, and that is anxiety producing, because things are chaotic. I mean, let's face it. If we stop, then it will happen. But that will be our fault.
Yeah, I want to follow up on that. They talked, maybe at Missional AI where you spoke, but it could have been Faith Tech. I watched a seminar for Faith Tech as well. They talked about the disconnect between the pastoral leadership and the congregations. That the pastors are hesitant to speak because they don't feel like they're technically qualified to talk on AI. But the spiritual nature of the beast is such that the congregation has questions, and they really are. We're getting to spiritual questions, the nature of humanity, the nature of the value of human worth, and what it means to be human. This technology is going to make that very hard for many. I mean, I grew up, I didn't have the phone, the smartphone for a long time. I think I was after 16, and I wouldn't lower that bar. I find myself using social media too much, but this is going to make things worse. So the value of humanity is going to be in the parents stepping
Absolutely.
in and redefining the boundaries for kids. There's value in learning to write and learning to read and do work by books and by paper up to a certain point. But then we have to tell them, once they have that critical reasoning, they have to get the understanding of how to use the technology. The disconnect between the people at the tip of the spear of this technology and the people in average communities like ours is getting much more further and further apart. And so the learning curve may feel like it's too big for some, but we need to understand that we have the agency to do good or ill with this technology, and that's my biggest concern, and that's what I want to bring out, the good in the community and people using this technology.
So
Well said.
Sorry, you mentioned the pastors and having a hard time. So both of my parents are pastors. They're retired now, but that is something I think we were taught. I mean, not to get into a theological debate, but I was created by God, and God created me with my brain, with my ability to create things on earth, right? So I can't make anything that wasn't already put in my mind. That makes it sound, you might be able to explain this better, but I think you.
So humans are created with agency and intelligence,
Yes.
A spirit that is discerning, right? What is good, what is bad, and I think there's some natural law things, like most 99.9% of humanity is adverse to murder or stealing things or being dishonest, right? So there are some things that are inherent in us, humanly, but I also believe that if you look at evolution, just look at evolution. I know it's not everybody's jam, but if you look at science and evolution, we have become more and more complex. It is what humans do. It is what biology does. And stasis is death in any organism.
Yes.
So if you look at humanity as an organism, or the earth as an organism, which it is, it can't just stay the same. So this changes here. So we can let fear rule the day, or we can say, we're going to make sure it's for good. We're going to make sure there's guardrails. We're going to press our local officials, our state officials, our national officials to say, you know what is for the good of humanity? Could it solve a crisis of food for people in countries where there's drought? I mean, there's great possibility, but we have to hold each other to account. And I personally believe that God wants us to create that with God.
Yes.
Like, we are incredible beings. Wow. That we could figure this out is phenomenal to me. So I don't think any machine is going to take over at all unless we stop using what God gave us, quite honestly, to say, let's choose that, not this. Let's raise our kids. Let's have a government that does this. Here's where we need help. So I'm not an apathetic person in that regard. Like, we have agency.
I think that's where the help.
I agree with that. There's two things I feel like every community should be doing in this period of time. One, going back and learning about the history of how the internet came to be and how we got here today. Because you can't really change things unless you understand where they come from.
That's right.
Two, we should start having maker spaces. I wish churches had maker spaces. It blows my mind that libraries have maker spaces, but churches don't. And it's not expensive. Like these churches that are mega churches, they have, I'm going to complain for just a second. They spend $20,000 on lighting and fog machines and bullshit. When a maker space is 10 grand. 3D printer,
I think
laser
It's
engraver,
a creative space.
soldering tools,
It's kind
and
of like a
computer.
co-working.
And now you have a thing that's open, like a coffee shop. And some churches have coffee shops. It's open to the public all the time, and people walk in and can use the tools and actually do something and create something. And if you have content, you have curriculum around how AI works, how base systems function, then you can actually contribute to innovation. You can think
It's all
about
ones and
things
zeros.
not as they are, but as they should be. And nobody's really doing that right now. That's my biggest chief complaint. Is like nobody in a faith walk actually has the physical spaces, the physical labs with simple technology. I mean, this is not expensive stuff. You can put this in a garage.
Yep.
To do experiments. Nobody does that. You know, we should be doing experiments, little experiments for fun, and integrating that into our communities, because there's not many people that are vocalizing this. It's mostly academia, and they're lost. They're just kind of going on the ride. They don't actually know or understand how to craft something that's alternative to the current narrative. So, from my point of view, I'm not a big fan of public school, but anyways, that I agree with. We can't stop believing we have agency, because the minute we do, everything's lost. We're no longer participating, we're slaves.
That's right.
I have to say, okay, I'm on an individual level, you know, my belief is there are things that I can do to make a difference.
Mhm.
However, if I am looking at the billionaires in Amazon and Facebook and so on, and how they are lined up together in ways that seem to not actually be intentional in the positive ways you are talking about. I don't know where the God is, and I am someone who's traveled and lived around the world, so you can be the Buddha to me, you can be, I've lived with people everywhere and know their humanity.
That's right.
And their faith. And compassion is a common theme. Caring for others is a common theme.
It should be.
Now, when I'm looking up, I am not seeing that, Matt, as a legislator, as a leader.
No pressure.
Who is, and I'm not, I mean, it's not,
No, you're good.
you are the person here. And I value you, and I appreciate what you do, and I think you come at this with a really ethical view. I am not sure about, I mean, there's such controversy, even in peer, about how people treat each other, and the politics of it, and you believe this, and you believe this, and like something is not true here. And so I'm with you, but I am, as someone who follows humanity and politics and the way things are being decided, I am deeply troubled about the people who are at the top making decisions and how that affects all of us. Because I can turn off Starlink and the Ukrainians can't defend themselves.
Right.
And so we have people in power who can change everything at their whim.
And I'm concerned too, I like that you say it's local politics, but even just an awareness of some young people that have moved to this state. And I used to be a former Republican county official. And now red or blue, we're just arguing all the time instead of saying what is best for our country. What is that? Andy Foley and Larry O'Toole campaigned together. One was a Democrat, one was a Republican, and they got the same number of votes because both of them cared for what was going on in our community. And that's a tradition that I really like to see happening and want to see happening. So I don't have a young woman that says, we moved to Watertown, and I'm afraid to even go to a church because this state is so red and I'm getting attacked all the time. That's not kindness. That's not community. So, and I was just worried about the immigrants that live in town. I didn't think it was a white woman that was scared to be in Watertown. And it's like, wow, what's going on? And I think we can. It was exciting just to be here and hear a young person say what you're saying, and it gives me hope. And I was at the University of Denver when that big computer took engineering department, the whole floor. And now I have this phone that does
8,000 times more. Yeah.
Mhm.
And so the idea that maybe this whole data center argument isn't even necessary because,
It'll be obsolete.
yeah. So there's some excitement in that, and putting the people in the place that do have the power, that are not just looking at what PAC is supporting me, or what am I supporting this political party or this church that I belong to? Am I supporting the Watertown community, the village? So many good things are going out there. With that idea, we're building houses that have space in them for people to live in our community. That's really exciting.
Yeah, we covered a gamut there. I don't want to go down I don't know if we want to derail this into red versus blue, but
And I know. Because there's we, they, and
It's about
whether I
humanity.
like pizza or don't
Yeah.
like pizza.
Us as people.
Yeah, and back to where I think Juanine kind of talked about the oligarchs, perhaps the folks that are controlling shareholders of these major companies. I mean, that some of that stuff is gonna, that's and perhaps this idea of this decentralized nature of some of these things is perhaps where some of the power gets taken back. But you ask kind of what their objectives are. I mean, at the end of the day, these are corporations, and they're you look at the incentives, and that'll show you what the actions are going to be, and the incentives are to maximize shareholder value, and so that's what they're attempting to do, and we as people, we spend the money that supports these companies, right? And so you think of social media, if you're not paying for something, you are the product, right? And so your views and what you put on social media, that is the product. The eyeballs are what they're selling, and so that's really where it comes down to people saying, and I don't know what generation you are, but I'm a millennial, and I think there is starting to be some kind of just 16 hours a day on a screen. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Is that really where, and I don't think it's going to change anytime real soon for certain professions, but I think that there is this awakening a little bit to go, gosh, we are really wasting away a lot of our lives in front of these things and giving up our humanity perhaps to these companies. And so at the end of the day, they're just following market incentives. And it's us as the people that are supporting their projects.
Yeah, you hit it right.
Can I add to that?
Yeah.
There's six stakeholders I think of when I look at all the action taking place in the tech sector. There's the consumer of the technology, which is the user. So everyone's thinking about what they want, making things more than what they are. Then there's, like you said, stock and shareholders. That's what executives and C-suite people care about at these companies. Those are two. Number three is actually the banking industry. So you have to understand finance to understand there's a lot of leverage being applied in different verticals of the economy. And some things are over leveraged, some things are under leveraged. And banks always want more predictability, so that they can apply things in a statistical way that yields the outcome they desire. And that means control. And so banks are always going to aim for any kind of technology or solution that gives them more oversight, more control over something, so they can model it better. Then after that, there's national defense. National defense cares about sovereignty, cares about protecting people, cares about cyber defense. And then you have the public square, which is politicians. And politicians feed into all of these different stakeholder groups because that's who gets them elected. So it's not really one specific group of people that are driving us in a direction. It's just this is what it is to be in America today. And I agree with the person who said that people. Actually, I don't know if I heard it completely, so I'm not going to quote it. But what I'll say is, what's exciting and optimistic to me is there are people that are realizing the importance of self-discovery because of AI. They're starting to question their own humanity. They're starting to ask questions like, what does that mean to be human?
Yeah.
And when you start asking questions, what does it mean to be human? You also start asking questions, what does it mean to be a good human, or a nice human, or a kind human, or a diligent human, or a dignified human, right? So, and that means better behavior. That means better cohesion. People are kind, like civilization moves up, right? Not everyone attacks everyone all the time and controls them 24/7. So that gives me some hope. A lot of people are like, "Oh, it's the end of the world. The AI is going to kill everyone." Destroy everything. I don't think so. I think it's actually creating incentives for things to change in the way that we want them to change. People being nicer, conversations being more genuine, less screen time, better safety, better margins. It's kind of giving everything to everybody, but it's going to be a bumpy ride until we get there. And there is nobody driving it in the right direction. And so that's why we have to participate. Otherwise, it will go off the rails.
That's right.
Right? Because we still live in a democratic republic where things are participatory. Thank goodness. But anyways, that's my view.
I don't know if you have that question, but that was one of my questions, that someone was quite trying to research how to find this in the leaders of AI. They were asking so-and-so leaders all over, and they couldn't pin down who's in charge or what the governance model really is controlled by. So could either of you two explain that a little? You're both a little more technical, Tyler and Dr. Cole.
So yeah, I'll share this. I'm doing a research paper. I was just talking to someone I know at Berkeley who's going to maybe help me write it, and then a guy that is the chief scientist at a healthcare company. He cares about governance too for a lot of different reasons. But what's interesting and fascinating is nobody really knows what these CEOs or CTOs think. They change quite often, right? And it's because, like any executive, they sort of have to appease people, their shareholders, the public, PR. But when you're in the driving seat, or even if you're just delegating, or you look like you're in the driver's seat, you still need to be understood. And so I'm writing a research paper to understand what these different leaders believe and what they think and how they think. And it's really informative. When I talked to this guy at Berkeley today, let me show you this book he recommended me, actually. Let me show a book real quick on Amazon. I don't get any money by advertising this. I'm just fascinated. So there's a book that he referenced. It was called Getting Saved from the 60s. If anyone, let me see if I can show that. So this is the book. It's called Getting Saved from the 60s. It's written by Stephen Timpton. And basically what he talks about is the 60s were a time when individualism emerged, like real opinionated individualism. And this book kind of frames how the counterculture in the 60s propagated this idea of the self and how we need to be unique. And anyways, the point of this is this book is an example of how I hope to write about the ideologies and the influences in these tech circles and what emergent behavior is coming out of them. I don't know, but I'm reading into it and researching it. It's a question. A lot of people that are governance professionals and anthropologists and sociologists are asking the question of, like, where are we going to be 5 years from now? What kind of behaviors can we predict today and get right 5 years from now? Because of the things being said, because of the way philosophically these leaders are talking and thinking and sharing what they know. So that's what I'm doing, some paper research. And so if anyone's interested in that, feel free to send me an email or something. Now, in terms of AI governance, so AI governance, there's two levels of this. There's the data that's fed into AI, that's data governance. I did a lot of work there. And there's AI evaluations. And the way in which you do evaluations is actually changing quite a bit because of the tools and technology that's available to do them. some tools, example like LangChain or Brain Trust, these are two software products that you can use to form evaluations of models and determine if they're coherent, if they're hallucinating, if their data is being modeled or weighted properly. And if you don't have good governance as a project team, your project, your product, your building is not going to work. Now, if you don't have a good governance model as a company, you expose yourself to a lot of risk. You get sued, you make bad ethical decisions, you're not aware of what's going on, you have employees that aren't necessarily rogue, there's very high risk in the terms of they're willing to take lots of risks because they're very curious, they're curious Georges. But to a CFO or CRO, that might be a bad thing. And if you don't know who the curious Georges are, they can get you in trouble. So there's a level of mitigation you have to manage there. And then there's the national governance risk. And there is not really much work being done today in this space compared to Europe. And I'm actually happy about that because what's happening in Europe is an overregulation where you're stamping out any ability for anyone to do anything. The amount of development that's happened in Europe in the last 10 years compared to the United States is nothing. Like just it's sad actually. Where in the United States, because we don't have a regulated environment, people can actually experiment. They can actually take risks. They can actually explore things. They can actually do things beyond published research. So I think that's good. But as these systems evolve, we're going to have to rethink governance. And I'm not an advocate of centralized governance. I'm an advocate of what I call quasi-distributed governance. So what that looks like is you create the right incentives for large actors to behave right. So, and that's already kind of being done, actually. An example might be Walmart. I'll use Walmart as an example. So Walmart has one of the largest data estates in the world, fun fact. And if they do not understand what they're collecting on people, they can get sued because they're a global company. They also have to adhere to various regulations like GDPR, which is in Europe. They now have to adhere to the UAE Act, but they don't really have a presence in Europe, so it's not that big of a deal. But they have customers in Europe that shop international and have things shipped and drop shipped, even from Walmart, from America to Europe. And so they have to follow these regulations. And so it's kind of funny that because we live in a global world, and there are many companies in the United States that are global, the laws are already there and they're already doing the job. They're just not locally enforced, but they're there in other places to be enforced. And that enforcement alone puts the right kind of pressure for the business to behave a certain way without you having to enforce it locally. So that's how I think about it. I don't know if that made any sense. I'm really tired. It's 5:30, so I'll shut up, but hopefully someone else has something else to say.
Thank you.
Okay. Does Dr. Cole, did you want to put anything out there, maybe as we wrap up?
Get to.
Or do we go till 6?
Well, we have a hard stop at 6. Got to
Okay.
get out. But I want to get more audience questions after we wrap up this.
Yeah,
question.
we're not hearing you.
You're muted.
I think he muted himself.
Oh, Matthew, you're muted.
Let me see if I can find it.
Oh, I can't hear you. It might be your settings. Go look at your settings.
Gosh, there's a tech problem.
AI will fix it.
I had one earlier
No,
today,
still
like,
can't hear
why
you.
can't I fix this?
So I had to restart my computer.
Yep, now we can.
Okay, I pushed it in. Or might have got disconnected. Go ahead.
Okay, so no, I think Tyler covered governance pretty well. I mean, I think it's also just kind of a rapidly changing area as we learn new things there. But yeah, we kind of just need to take responsibility going forward. I mean, what we do today, it's not necessarily going to be the same probably 5 or 10 years from now. The technology or the field is just going to constantly be evolving, so we really think about that. No, I don't have too much else. Yeah, I think stuff was covered pretty well. Are there any questions directly from me?
Are there some audience questions?
Is there anything else that you wanted to cover?
Well, with the Anthropic covering constitutional AI, one other that was very interesting concept, because we have this tradition in the West of constitutions and covenantal relationships forming society. And I'm not to the point where I think they know what they're doing with constitutional AI, because do they actually recognize the deep theological and deep legal tradition and political tradition of where our constitutional values did come from in the West? So we'll have, I definitely want to look at that more. It'd be interesting to see that structured better, because that's probably the most unique thing I've seen out of one of the tech leaders, was actually building it out as a constitutional model.
I've never heard of that.
I've never heard of it either.
Amadei, a leader of Anthropic's been building it out that way. So I don't know if there's anyone else that's been talking about that in Google or in Microsoft, but that's definitely been from Anthropic and some others, some smaller people.
Well, I'm glad to hear that, because one of the things that personally concerns me is there's a concept out there. It's been around for about 100 years, technocracy.
Yeah.
And it's, if you haven't heard of technocracy, you ought to go Google it, because it really
Or the library.
Yeah,
Right.
there you go. Well, because it's very interesting, but it borders on what we're talking about, kind of to your point, Juanine, about here's all the big money tech companies, what are they doing? And again, I'll go back to our agency as citizens, but we have an advantage in the United States, I hope, that we get to form it the way it ought to be formed, which is what we should be pushing for. We don't want China's system. There's something wrong with overregulation as well, because even though it's not creativity like in a makerspace, it is still creativity. All of this is incredible creativity, quite honestly. It truly is. It speaks to the depth of the human brain and imagination to come up with the AI concept in the first place. So we can't lose sight of those things. But I think the technocracy, which, like I said, has got about 100-year history, came around with the Industrial Revolution, where there were people that were creating the inventions and funding them and monetizing them from a consumer standpoint. And we get into trouble with capitalism when we lose our ethics and morals in the first place.
That's
right. Because if there's a 500% profit margin, and I'm not making 500% more than I was last year, I have a real problem buying your product.
Yeah, but we forget the architect of capitalism, Adam Smith, had the wealth of nations, but he also paired that with the theory of moral sentiments.
It's right.
The moral nature of what we are to do amongst our fellow men. We are to serve in business our fellow man is the foremost duty of a business owner and a business person in
right.
business or commerce. And that's something that's been sorely lacking for a long time.
Well, and it goes back to what, how we share so much as humans, and when we other each other, and when we categorize and make people less than, that's where we get into muddy waters, and we will hurt ourselves. So really, it's up to us. For God's sake, it is up to us, literally, to shake this out. And I know it's overwhelming. It's overwhelming to me too, to think of the money behind it all, and wonder if there's any good intention there. I can't tell you that.
Uh-huh.
But we surely outnumber the billionaires, for God's sake, and we have the power of the wallet.
Another thing with the data centers, there's a great concern of the value our way of life is being attacked, and this speaks to the agricultural side, I suppose, Dr. Cole. There's this Jeffersonian thought that we need to maintain the agrarian culture, especially in South Dakota. We're very much built into agriculture. I'm more build to the future and with caution personally. So I'm excited about data centers if it can fit the community's needs and the community can get to a consensus on it. But how do we balance agrarian and agricultural interests with this the danger of there was a conversation with John Lennox. He's a very gifted mathematician and theologian of sorts. He was talking about there's almost a Luddite attitude of like, are we going to see another Amish breakaway in like the different churches or religions? Like they just want to disconnect because they don't feel like they have any agency. I know we talked about agency already, but not touched on the agrarian, maintaining our culture and way of life. How do you see it from the farmers and the researchers in the field? Did you hear any of that? Oh, he's got his mic.
He's
off.
muted.
Oh, I'm here.
Yeah, we got you.
Okay. Could you repeat the question? You faded out there.
There's like an agrarian culture that I've seen a lot of even politicians or friends get riled up about, and the farmers are certainly concerned, but there's this fear of balancing our Jeffersonian agrarian culture and our economy in South Dakota with new development. And you're a little on the tech side of agriculture, but I just was curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah. So on the agricultural side of things, I mean, people aren't too thrilled about data centers for a number of reasons. Well, one, I guess the two top reasons is utility and water costs, or power and water costs. Those we've seen data centers built in other states. I mean, we've seen those costs go up over time with data centers, but then it also comes down to land as well. I mean, in Ohio, what's it called, Stargate? There's a massive facility being built right now to provide infrastructure for AI. And so, I mean, it really makes things tough for farmers because when price of land goes up and the cost of water and power goes up, I mean, it's just getting the margins that really aren't there for our farmers. So, they're not really too thrilled about it because, I mean, again, we've seen it in other states when those costs tend to go up and farmers are going to be putting the bill from those increased costs just to maintain those facilities in our area. So, yeah, overall, I mean, not too many people from what I can see on the ag side are excited about this. Yeah, I mean, it does need essential resources needed for agriculture. And, from these other mistakes that we've seen in other states, I think those are lessons to be learned. And that's kind of just ways for South Dakota and people in our area to go, okay, well, Ohio, again, big state where a lot of data centers are being built. What went wrong there? What can be done differently? So if we do stuff here in South Dakota, we're not making those same mistakes of driving up costs for everybody and making life harder on our farmers. It's, if it is to be done, what needs to be done so it's done right. But then, like I mentioned earlier at the start of the forum, we got to think long term. Are these data centers going to be in use 10, 20, 30 years from now? Or, is this just a fad where people are going to eventually be doing stuff in their own homes and that facility is going to be sitting there empty, and everybody had to pay for something expensive that only lasted 5 years. So, yeah, we do got to kind of think about what is the right balance of doing some of this stuff so life's not harder for our agricultural community, which translates to a high percentage of South Dakota citizens. But also then, how do we also try to stay on top of the ball where, okay, people in South Dakota aren't left behind in this AI trend. We're still able to do things correctly and keep up in our area.
On the land use piece, I guess I would ask, why is this an issue with these facilities and not a large manufacturer of a widget? I understand there's other issues, the electricity issues and water issues potentially, but why would this concern bubble up just in terms of a data center when the same size facility could be manufacturing widgets or parts of some tractor or whatever? I mean, how
they
come?
don't use as much energy.
Yep. And so that's a separate issue. But I'm saying just on the pure land use issue, you said that they're threatening our way of life. Well, we have a huge Terek facility in Watertown that took a bunch of ag land.
Yeah.
And we have large manufacturing facilities for decades since the Industrial Revolution that have taken ag land. So from a pure land use perspective, what makes this any different? That's what I would push back at.
So one thing was, I cannot remember the company and the exact location off the top of my head, but it was down in the Clear Lake area. I do remember that. I recall somebody was talking of eyeballing wanting to put a data center there.
Applied
Digital.
Yep.
Okay, yeah, and the planned area was, if you basically in the middle of nowhere.
Right.
Well, these things create different types of pollution, noise, light, etc. And putting that in the middle of a dark countryside, I don't think not all farmers want a moment. I mean, I know farmers have to put up with a lot of noise, but putting up with the data center in the middle is another point that I was trying to think about too is it should affect land prices as well. I mean, these companies they'll pay about any amount of money to put up a land or to put up a data center. And again, we've seen stories of other states, they would offer massive checks to certain landowners so they could buy them out and use it. So price of land, I think, is something that does need to be considered too, because I'm going off on a tangent here because housing is a whole other separate issue.
I guess I don't disagree with that, but then on the same train of argument, you could say that we should start regulating the Hutterites because they'll pay any price for land. I mean, there's all sorts of land uses that are driving up the cost of land, and so I guess I have a concern about the land use argument that a private property owner chose to sell their land to another private owner. I have a concern, but the energy and water piece, I would comment on. It's huge, but it's also not site specific. And so when I say that, I mean, if we say we're not going to have them in our neighborhood, your electricity prices are going up anyway if it's down the street. And so if it's in Minnesota, we're all on the same grid.
Right.
And so if our electricity prices are going up, we say not in our neighborhood, they're going to go up anyway. And so where I come from on that issue is perhaps we should say, okay, if these two issues, the water use issue I think has been, with modern technology, has now been largely remediated. The electricity piece is not. It is causing an increase in electricity, but it's also going to cause electricity increases if it's in Minnesota or North Dakota or Nebraska.
Right.
We're not going to get the property tax benefit in South Dakota. So
that is the biggest thing, because we don't generate our own power here. We get it from other places for the most part.
Right.
So that is a huge issue, and that's an economic issue in the deal of it all.
Mm-hmm. And the other piece about what's interesting about AI and technology, it's starting to kind of come to me, and some commentators are talking about it now. Historically, technology companies, specifically the ones that are heavy into AI now, were very capital light companies. Mm-hmm. They had to have data farms, traditional data farms, et cetera, but not to this extent. Now, these data centers are costing, I think OpenAI is going to invest $700 billion over the next 4 years in new data centers, which ultimately means their products are going to be more expensive. And so it's also the interesting tension here with, historically, technology was this low-cost provider that you could start to whittle down your workforce because you could technologize things. But now there's going to be a real question of, okay, AI can maybe do this pretty effectively, but I also have to pay basically just as much to this AI company as I would pay an employee. So now there's going to be a real cost-benefit analysis that's going to be not very far off in terms of cost to say, maybe I'd rather have a person running that maybe using an AI, but not completely replacing that person. So I think that's going to become a bigger and bigger part of the discussion of the cost of compute is going to get passed on to businesses and individuals that need it, more so than it has in the past because of the massive investments that are needed.
I do think the employment is an issue with downsizing of tech companies, of all kinds of companies that are, Ed Jones talked about cutting 10% of their workforce because they didn't need people to do that accounting, those number crunching things. They promised that they would give them training so that they could go on and find another job. That was their commitment to them. But that's not everybody's commitment. So I think we're looking at, on the human side, some additional important things to consider as side effects of impacts of this change. And any change causes that. But I think I grew up thinking, not grew up, but it used to be, well, get a tech job. And it's like, whoa, baby. 8,000 are gone, 10% gone from Facebook or whomever it was this week. So we're looking at all kinds of changes that are going to be dynamic for humans.
But I think there's unintended consequences. So you were talking about ag land. Our ag land is going to change forever on the hill. There's a whole square mile that'll never be ag land again. And we're very aware of that. So there's unintended consequences there. It's, and I think that's where the human discernment comes into all of this. And our voice is being heard, but we can't be silent either. That's our part in this. Being a human is a cooperative effort. So,
So just to kind of play devil's advocate a little bit on this. So yes, okay. I will preface this by saying I am not originally from South Dakota. I grew up in the Chicago area. I lived in Michigan. Most of my formative years were in the Chicago area. Moving here, I can tell you that there is a very specific mindset that I have not encountered in any of the other places that I have lived or experienced. And while, yes, it is obviously very, very important to protect ag land and things like that because it's necessary. Those are things that we need, and it is what we have here in South Dakota as a main resource. But the more that we say, no, we're not doing that because it will take this away, the more that we're going to become that, like you mentioned earlier, the society that draws away from the progress. We're going to become, it's going to be like South Dakota is going to say, nope, we're not taking that because it's progress, or because that progress is going to cause this issue. When you think about throughout history, the Industrial Revolution, things like that. Unfortunately, yes, we do see peaks and valleys of employment, of technological advancement, of, what do we do now? But that is again, playing back into what makes us human is what do we do now? Okay, let's figure it out. We can't say that we want to invest in the future of South Dakota. One of the things I hear from people all the time is, I don't understand why people don't stay. People leave. The young kids are leaving. They're going to different places. Well, guess what? They're going to different places because there's more opportunities for them in other places. Not all young people in South Dakota want to become farmers, and land is already owned by farming families. And so that's not something that's even an option for a lot of them.
You're right.
So even if they want to be farmers, South Dakota doesn't always offer that ability because it's, like I said, the land's already owned, it's already farmed, it's been in this family for generations. All of those things, those are wonderful things, but they're not the things that are going to keep people here or increase the number of young people who return after college. And so we have to find the balance of where we continue forward with progress and where we continue to hold on to some of that tradition. The tradition is important, but so is the future.
And tradition isn't everything.
Right.
So I'll go back to my,
Yes.
first of all, Matt talked about the probability, right?
Mhm.
So that's the balance. Where is the balance? Where's the probability that this is going to work? And that's the fine tuning that needs to be done with this. The tool's already been created, quite honestly. The technology is there.
Also, you young people here today give me a lot of hope for my grandchildren, because I hear you talking with the moral fiber. John Meacham talked at SDSU about this moral fiber that makes a difference when push comes to shove.
Mhm.
And I hear that in your speeches.
Yes.
And that thrills me. That gives me hope for the next generation.
Yep.
And the generation after that.
Yes.
So good for you.
I was gonna say just a couple of notes I had on the jobs that I've kind of observed, and one, which I think will be interesting how this progresses, but historically, the last 20 years, the ticket to a middle class lifestyle in this country was, or not 20 years, 50 years, let's say, was to go to college, get a white collar job, move up in the ranks, retire, etc. Well, now, if AI is going to start to replace some of these functions that white collar workers are doing, we're going to be a huge beneficiary here at Lake Erie Tech, right? Because it's going to be people, the young kids are going to go, I need something to do with my hands. I need something that's not going away. I mean, I drive around town all the time and I see things that, like, AI is not taking that away. That house being built, AI is not taking that away. That road being constructed, AI is not taking that away. And so I think there's going to be an interesting turn, I don't know what the word is, but turnover in the workforce in terms of this fresh look at blue collar work, ag work, if you can get it, if you can buy land, et cetera. But because the white collar opportunities are going to slowly deplete. I mean, they're still going to be there, of course, but I think they're going to, as a share, they'll probably deplete. And the other thing I was going to mention was, we look at history in terms of like the Industrial Revolution, the Internet era. There's bound to be job displacement in this revolution too. But we sit here today, a post-Industrial Revolution, post-Internet, the Internet era, and we're still at 4 to 5% unemployment, which is essentially full employment. And so, I choose to be an optimist that yes, there's going to be some displacement. Yes, there's going to be some required government, nonprofit programs to retrain people, et cetera, but that we'll get through this, keep our agency over this new technology and make it, useful to us, not users of us. So.
Yep.
Well, it's been a passion concept in my head since college, seeing the failure of college from a young person's perspective. I do say, for my mother, I respect the time that I had there. It was beneficial. I've pushed her buttons a little bit on that, but I had this concept that we need to have, like the tech school, LATC needs to do more than the trades. They need to have apprenticeships for the white collar jobs. That could be an alternative for the education model to keep the pipeline alive for white collar doctors, engineers, lawyers, that kind of stuff. And we just haven't seen that since the founding of the country.
The apprentice model.
Yeah.
I would like to say, I do want my doctor or my surgeon to
Well, they'll still have a certification.
to have a significant amount of education.
They'll still have a certification.
Yes.
You're just
But
having
also some hands-on.
a more hybrid approach.
Please don't operate on me if you learned how to do this with AI. Thank you. That's my TED Talk.
But if there's any more questions from the audience, we should get those before we get out.
Was this beneficial for you all?
Very much.
Yeah, very interesting. Very much.
It was very quiet, but very much.
You talked about your pastor not wanting to talk about AI because they didn't feel qualified.
Well,
we're all up here not qualified.
I couldn't get a Protestant to show up. It's tougher than the Protestants showing up to get it than the lawyer showing up.
just like AI,
except for my friend Tyler and I.
I mean, I'm a Protestant.
Oh, you? Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, something I'm kind of curious about. Like KT, you use AI in your writing. as a tool,
Yes,
not to write the book.
Correct.
But as a tool.
yes.
But has AI progressed to the point that, say, you're trying to use it to write a book or a paper or something, and it comes back and says, can it come back to you and say, now look, somebody else over here did almost exactly the same thing, you need to stop and turn around.
Are they going to correct plagiarism? Is that what you're saying?
Well,
Yeah.
or
There are AIs that are built to do that. There are AI, just as an example for this specific question, I have a story that I'm working on that is actually very much a futuristic, what would happen if we go a little too far. But it has the human control over the AI as part of it. So one of the things that I said when I was kind of just throwing ideas out at my little chat back and forth was, I want to avoid this coming across as 1984, A Brave New World, the Hunger Games. Like I don't want my story to come too close to these things. And so then it came back at me and said, well, here's how your story differs from these things. But here are the things that could tie into the same genre, which tying in the same genre is fine, but my story shouldn't be just a regurgitation of someone else's. However, all creative works end up being a little bit of a regurgitation of everything that we've learned and seen and thought, because you get ideas from life and you are exposed to all kinds of things. So short answer is yes, there are AIs out there that are designed to identify plagiarism. Long answer is no, most AIs are in my experience, unlikely to be like, oh, hey, by the way, that's this
Not gonna
exact
put this
paragraph.
in,
Yeah, because ultimately you decide what you put in there.
And I wonder about it in different things that I've read, it talks about, well, you can use AI to write job descriptions or different things
Yeah,
like
you
that. And then I wonder if you're trying to use AI to write a technical manual, is it gonna know enough to ask you enough questions about what you're trying to do?
There are people, so they actually, and I say very loosely, AI companies, they hire professionals to train different AI bots to have those types of, that level of expertise. I have been asked to help with it in a writing standpoint. I didn't want to, simply because I don't think that I am qualified enough for those types of things. I'm a writer, but I don't see myself as like, Stephen King or John Grisham or someone who's really, really well honed in the craft. And so I don't know that I'm the right person for it.
Not yet.
Right, sure, not yet.
Get there. You got a lot of books though.
Well,
I do have a lot of books, yes.
and my experience with AI has just been, when you search on Google or something, and the AI thing comes up at the top of the search, and it's kind of footnoted. It says where it got the information for you, so that's a helpful tool.
Yes.
But maybe I got to go ask the Google AI guy what's the best AI to use to write a
Well,
manual
mine, of course,
for
mine.
this water.
Yeah.
I've used AI for the two things mentioned, for like position descriptions and the technical manual. And the position thing, because I was old, I kind of knew what I wanted to write, but all of a sudden I could just hit print.
Sure.
And the technical manual had to feed in quite a few words. And what would have taken me, I'm just going to guess, let's say it would have taken me 10 hours, took me 3 hours.
Yep.
And so even at my age, not knowing too much about this industry, it's in the last year, it has saved me many hours to reach the same outcome.
Yep.
Well, and it's almost like having an encyclopedia literally at your fingertips. Because back in the day, we would have been in the library with our index cards, all the things, right? That's the way I grew up. That's the era I grew up in. So it's a shortcut and delivers it right here. So I look at it that way. It is a shortcut, but then you still have to, right? You, as the person who's producing it, because you're responsible for that production, your stamp of approval has to be the end on the end product. So it comes back to that discerning human quality.
And you still have to know, I think Katie mentioned, don't make this sound like the Hunger Games, don't make this sound like 1984. Well, when did you read 1984? Probably in 9th grade or 10th grade. And so you think of you don't know what you don't know.
It becomes abstracted over time.
But the idea that, you think about it in the abstract, you start getting worried, what's the value of education anymore if you can just say, here's what I want, and it just creates it. Well, if she didn't know about 1984, having learned about it, she wouldn't have even known to say, don't make this like 1984. So there's going to become this whole new, idea that the prompt is really what there's going to become. There's a skill in writing these prompts, right? You can tell it what not to do, what to do. If I've written something and I want it to give me some ideas, I'll say, don't regenerate this with new form. Just look at it and tell me if there's things I might change. And then I'll say, I don't want to do that. I'll do that. I don't want to do that. It's just like an editor, essentially. Sorry, Roger.
See, my point on that is, if you're going to do all that, why not just do the work yourself?
Right.
I can tell it to do it and then make sure it did it right, or I can just do it myself.
Right.
Which I've been doing for 50 years. So.
Right.
Yeah.
I don't even know why I'm here.
Coming from a technical background, the reason I'd have it do it is because it can cut my time by 70%.
Yeah.
I work by the hours.
There you go.
My whole life.
There you go.
But that question though, okay, but you have those years of experience.
Right.
So the beauty of AI is it's trained by people with those years of experience who are teaching it to do these things so that it can then assist us and make us faster and more efficient. Now, trust me, I utilize Grammarly is a thing that I use in my books. My books go through, I write them, I send them to a story editor, she sends it back to me. I read what she's given me suggestions on, either adopt them or don't. So I do rewrites. I then send it through Grammarly, and then I make it read it to me out loud, and then I send it to an editor who then sends it back to me, and then I read through it again to make sure that everything that I want to say and everything. So it goes through all of these different processes, and yes, some of that includes, the computer, like Grammarly.
And that's what we've been saying. I mean, if you think of AI as just one tool that you can use.
Yes.
One layer in that.
It's a lot less problematic.
Yes.
Right,
And it's
but-
made my life easier.
Totally.
But even if you go back to my encyclopedia example,
Yes.
somebody compiled those 35 volumes for us so that I could, as a 7th grader, go look up Great Britain.
Yep.
Right? I mean, so they saved me time by compiling the encyclopedia.
And then
So-
somebody took that and put it onto Encarta and
That's right.
saved me time when I was in 7th grade.
Yeah. So
I had EBSCO hosts.
there you go.
Well, and we didn't talk about it. You mentioned it right at the beginning, but just in terms of the lawyers, the state bar having policies, just kind of in this whole topic where it's a tool, they're still a human at the end.
Yeah.
They're still with the law, for example, lawyers. Some
put your
lawyers
name on the line.
are adopting it fast. Some lawyers are slow to adopt, just like any other technology. But at the end of the day, their name's on the line, their license is on the line. As an author, your reputation's on the line, and so you can use a tool to make it perhaps a little bit quicker for you. But at the end of the day, a human is still taking ownership of whatever they're putting out.
Yeah. Do you have any closing statements, Tyler and Dr. Cole?
You have 10 seconds. They're both good? You guys good in virtual world? Are you good?
I think they're good.
Thank you for your input.
Thank
Yes,
you,
I
thank
wanna-
you very much.
I want to thank you for making this possible, audience and panel.
Thanks for
You're
having us.
welcome. Yes, it's a great conversation.
Well, everything was live streamed and it's on social media.
It's on the internet.
Yes, and it's on YouTube, Facebook, Twitch, and LinkedIn, and then we'll upload it as a news article too. But so you guys can watch it. Share it with people later if you want to and whatnot as well. So
It'll probably be inputted into a ChatGPT.